YouTube Nation, we are currently recalling stories from The Office, and this could go on all day because people love The Office. So, all right. Did you guys notice what song I was playing as you walked in today? The Circle of Life. Because, thank you, Sam. I appreciate you. Thank you, Sam. Way to go. All right. So the circle of life, otherwise sometimes known as the unit circle, but more affectionately known as the circle of life, that gives us all the graphs that we need. So I want you to think about this for a second again. We are going to locate these points. You don't have to write this down. You just need to follow along. What's this coordinate right here? 1, 0. What's this coordinate right here? And this one over here. This one here. And so, yep, Maddie and Noah gone. Typical. Logan gone. Nobody cares anymore. Nope. Missing. Okay, so I just want to encourage again that you would understand that all the graphs that we produce, it's just a unit circle unraveled. So if you start at 0, you got pi over 2, you got pi, you got 3 pi over 2, you've got 2 pi. Those are the values that we just straighten out here, right? We have pi over 2, we've got 3 pi over 2. And let's talk about the cosine graph right now. Where's cosine positive? Cosine is positive in the fourth. Where else is it positive? First. How'd you know that, Sam? All students take calculus. So therefore, we have positive, negative, negative, positive. Okay? And cosine is which value? The x value or the y value? The x value. So you can see it starts at 1. So cosine starts up here. And then it gets to 0. So it drops to here. And then it's at negative 1. So it drops to here. Then it's at 0, then 1. So notice how it's positive because it's the first quadrant. And then it's negative because it's the second quadrant. Negative because it's the third quadrant. And it's positive because it's the fourth quadrant. The unit circle is, or the graph of cosine is simply the unit circle unraveled. Sine graph, same thing. And we can do the same thing for tangent and cotangent. But first you have to understand a little bit about tangent. How do we determine tangent using the terminal point? Sine over cosine, or y divided by x. Very good. So let's think about that. Y divided by x. 0. Y divided by x. Undefined. 0 divided by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by 0. So that means that tangent, if you consider it, it's positive in the first quadrant, negative in the second quadrant, positive in the third, negative in the fourth. So remember, look at cosine. Cosine went positive, negative, negative, positive. It took 4 quadrants for it to go through its cycle. But tangent, it goes positive, negative, positive, negative. So it just takes 2 quadrants to get through, right? So the period for tangent is not 2 pi. The period for tangent is just pi. Second of all, it has a 0 wherever we have the period. So it starts off at 0. When we get to pi, it's back to 0. When we go to 2 pi, it's back to 0. 3 pi, 0. So wherever you have the period, it's equal to 0. But what happens halfway in between? It's undefined. And what happens with a graph that has an undefined value? For example, 1 over x minus 2. Where is that undefined? At 2. And what happens at 2? What part of the graph do we have then? What do we call that straight line? Asymptote, a vertical asymptote. And so that will help us then generate the graph for tangent and cotangent. We start off with this. The period, pi, not 2 pi, divided by b. I tell you that right now, but the fact is that I will ask you to generate the graph of tangent, and many of you will take 2 pi and divide it by b. And that will happen to you in the test. Raise your hand if you think that it's possible for you to make that mistake, that instead of doing 2 pi, you might do pi. Okay, so how do I convince you otherwise? Should I scream at you? Should I threaten you? Kick you? Okay. Okay. Their responses relate it back to the office, and we'll remember it. Okay. All right. I'll try to think something up. Okay. Horizontal shift, we won't even really talk about, but you just do bx minus c is equal to 0 and solve for x. But we're not going to do any horizontal shifts. I used to, but the fact is it just doesn't come up very much for tangent, cotangent. Again, I have the ability to see forward into the rest of college trig and into calculus 1, calculus 2, and we really don't ever have to graph a tangent graph like that. Anytime you have to graph tangent, it remains pretty basic, pretty basic. We said that the period for the tangent graph is going to be pi. So what I do is I mark off pi, and I mark off negative pi. Then what I do is I ask myself, how many quadrants does it take for tangent to repeat itself? 2. So therefore, instead of dividing into 4 parts, I divide it into 2 parts. Pi over 2 and negative pi over 2. Awesome. Now, remember, tangent was equal to 0 at the period. So every time I have pi units, I mark off 0. What happened halfway in between? What happened halfway in between? Vertical asymptote. So halfway in between, I have these vertical asymptotes. Now, what quadrant is represented from 0 to pi over 2? What quadrant is represented from 0 to pi over 2? First one. And is tangent positive or negative in the first quadrant? Positive. What quadrant is represented from 0 to negative pi over 2? Fourth quadrant. So therefore, tangent is negative in the fourth quadrant. And these are the types of shapes that we generate. For example, how about pi over 2 to pi? Which quadrant is that? Second quadrant, is tangent positive or negative there? It's negative, so you can see it's below the x-axis. Then when it gets to the third quadrant, it's positive. Third quadrant will be over there. And that's the shape that it gets. Now, similar to a cubic, right? But a cubic actually flattens out at 0. Clap when he comes on in, okay? Everybody just start clapping. Wow. Look at that. Very good. This one right here is a part-time student. He might be in jail. I don't know, but apparently it's a Holiday Inn. Show up when you want. Okay. You're welcome. The whole Remind app thing is really caused. Okay, here we go. Let us consider cotangent. Okay. All right. Good luck to Ishika. Driver's test, go. Ishka, if you don't pass, don't feel bad. A lot of people don't pass the first time. Okay? Here we go. Period. Pi. I mark off pi. I mark off negative pi. Cotangent, just like tangent, requires 2 quadrants to repeat itself. Pi over 2, negative pi over 2. But what is the relationship between tangent and cotangent? Not opposite, they are reciprocals. They're reciprocals of each other. So, that's the period. So, think about this. Tangent is equal to 0 here. What's the reciprocal of 0? What's the reciprocal of 0? Undefined. So therefore, wherever the tangent graph is 0, the cotangent graph is undefined. Yeah, we got vertical asymptotes. Very good. Okay. Now, look at the tangent graph. It was undefined at pi over 2, so the cotangent graph will be 0. We're almost done here. All right, I'm going to go just to the right of 0 here, just to the right of 0. This is positive or negative? Big value, small value? Small value. So say we have a small positive value, like 1 over 100. What's the reciprocal of a small positive value? A large positive value. So you can see it's way up here. Let's move just to the left of the y-axis. Watch, we'll do it again. Move just to the left. This is a small y value, correct? Negative. So like say negative 1 over 100. What's the reciprocal of a small negative value? A large negative value. So you can see that the tangent graph starts down, finishes up. The cotangent graph starts up and finishes down. Let's consider then these. You always start by identifying the period. What is the period of letter A? One. I take pi divided by b, and pi divided by pi is 1. So I mark off 1 and negative 1. Divide into how many parts? y2. Takes 2 quadrants to repeat itself. Is tangent equal to 0 at the period, or is it undefined at the period? It's equal to 0 at the period. So wherever I have period values, I draw circles. What happens halfway in between? It's undefined, so I have vertical asymptotes. Does tangent start up and finish down, or start down and finish up? Starts down, finishes up. I can possibly approve your e-hall pass. Apparently I'm boring you. Tangents equal to 0 at the period. Cotangent is undefined at the period. And if you ask me why, I bring you back to this right here. It's equal to 0 at 0. It's equal to 0 at pi. Wherever the period is, it's equal to 0. Because it's y divided by x. Okay. Yep. Got it. Next one, period here. Pi is the period. I mark off pi and negative pi. Divide into pi over 2, negative pi over 2. Now what? The zeros? Vertical asymptotes halfway in between. The negative 2 out front. What do you think the negative does? Vertical flip. The 2 creates a stretch. Now, you don't have to show the stretch, but I will say that as this graph right now passes through the x-axis, the slope is whatever's out there. So as you see the negative 2, that's actually the slope as it passes through. So if you want to try to create a more of a kind of a stretched graph, you can go ahead and do that. Don't have to. Sure do need to make sure it's flipped upside down. Yeah? 2 more, you can have your assignment. You'll finish your assignment during the class. Hi! Emma, we're going to dedicate the next video to you tomorrow. Because we'll be thinking of you. Period. Four pi. Pi divided by 1/4 is 4 pi. Mark off 4 pi. Negative 4 pi. Divide in half. 2 pi. Negative 2 pi. Hey, that was pretty easy. Now what? Zeros and asymptotes. I like to put down the asymptotes first in this one because it's cotangent. So wherever tangent had a 0, I'm going to mark a vertical asymptote for cotangent. I will then go zeros halfway in between. Will this graph start down and finish up, or start up and finish down? Up and finish down because it is cotangent. What's the period for the next one? Our last example for the day. Close? It's incorrect. We take pi over 3, or we take pi and divide it by pi over 3. Multiply by the reciprocal, and you can see that you get 3. Mark off 3, negative 3, divide in half, 3 over 2, and negative 3 over 2. Very good. Wherever there were zeros, I put asymptotes. Zeros halfway in between, and as my good friend Maya, or MJ, says, you need to flip it. So great. Does that mean it starts down and finishes up, or starts up and finishes down? Starts down and finishes up. Very good. MJ? The first MJ would have been Michael Jordan. Yeah, I mean that was the reference. So, then stolen by. No. Yeah. Spider-Man. There you go.